Hello and welcome to another GFM Talk. My name is Silas Bingley and I'm one of the school improvement managers. And today we're going to be looking at I do, we do, you do, which is all about modelling instruction in the classroom. And the ideal outcome today will be that you have a greater awareness of this tool and able to then start using it as appropriate within the classroom. Right, on the screen, we've got a couple of illustrations of the point I'm going to make, and I'm certain you will have your own ones from your career as well. There have been multiple times when I have been teaching children where I have shown them something at the front of the class. Art always springs up as a really good example, where you might want a display of different flowers for a spring border you're going to put up. You show them how to draw a daffodil at the front. You say to the class, right, off you go. Really excited to see what colours and what shapes and what other flowers you come up with. And as you walk around, you realise very quickly you have 31 daffodils because they've just copied exactly what you did at the front. It can be frustrating, but it's also an incredibly useful thing. So what we're going to look at a little bit is how we can harness that power of what children wanting to replicate what we're doing and use it more purposefully and more precisely to get better outcomes for their learning. So to look at that, we're going to start by thinking a little bit about why children do this. So it's pretty obvious for many people. I've had discussions with staff where nature versus nurture comes up, and this certainly ties into that. So this is Albert Bandura's social learning theory. What he suggests, excuse me, and it's a little bit old now, but it's still relevant and it's still highly regarded. His theory suggests that we learn through observation and through people's modelling of behaviour and how they interact within certain situations. So the picture on the screen illustrates that. You will know that young children, it's why in early years we have role play areas for them to play in. It's why role play cafes have sprung up as a thing to do, particularly in the last 10 years. Children learn from watching those around them. Now, it can just be in their physical environment, but it also can be via internet, videos, TV, film, anything where they're able to observe a behaviour. Now, Bandura is really clear to say, just because you observe a behaviour does not mean you have learnt necessarily. What it does do is strengthen the case to say, if we model something, it is likely that children will want to replicate, and it is a good way for them to sort of start that learning process. A fantastic example to give on this is the idea of a baseball bat. So it's said that many people in the UK will not really use a baseball bat. We won't come into interaction with it, particularly growing up. We're far more likely to use shorter, rounder ones or cricket bats. But if you were to give someone a baseball bat, they would know what to do with it. And if we go back to Bandura's theory, that would be because we have observed through TV and film over multiple times people using them. So we know which end to hold. We know how it's supposed to be swung. We know the aim of where you would, like the stance, for example. So something that may be not within our immediate physical vicinity, something that may not be within our normal life, we know what to do with because we have observed it. Now, Bandura primarily looked at younger children, but this then does expand out towards adults. So why should we encourage it? Well, we want to encourage it for a whole plethora of reasons. So we're going to go through someone here, and there's a few more to add on. But one of them is the high expectations. This is a fantastic and easy way for you to model to the children exactly what is expected in your classroom. Whether you expect dates spelled correctly, whether you expect a certain style of presentation, whether you want them to answer one word, full sentences, paragraphs, whatever it is that you are trying to communicate to your children, they can visibly see it in a really quick snapshot. So the process we're going to walk through in a minute is the I do part. So in the I do part, you start by showing the children you are answering one of the questions. And this is the perfect way for you to say, I'm answering the question. Here I've got my LO, here I've got my date, here I've got my question set out, and now I'm going to do exactly what I'd like you to do. Another really useful tool is to encourage the exposure to higher concepts or vocabulary. We'll talk about this a little bit on the next slide, but using that technical terminology in your I do section just helps expose the children, helps maybe build a bridge for them to start using that where they may not have done that independently. There's other benefits such as you're able to adapt it to the children in the class, to the learning in the class, to be able to sort of see how they're getting on, able to hopefully tailor it to make sure that it's best suited for your class. And also within that, it helps create the classroom culture that if you are showing them the process and you are showing them that, okay, you might make mistakes along the way, it will help create a culture in that room where the children feel less fearful about making errors, and they will see that as a valuable part of their learning journey. And likewise, the misconceptions. We know children will get things wrong, and often we can almost predict what some of the common misconceptions will be. So we'll build it into our explanation of the task. It might be in the I do section, it might be better placed in the we do section where we as a class work through it. But again, this tool allows us to get to that point before the children then work independently and start making those mistakes and maybe deal with some frustration. And the final point on this one is about metacognition. It will just increase the awareness of children if you are able to verbalize what you are doing, the amount of processes that you are going through when you are completing a bit of a task or a piece of work. That even teachers, even adults, don't just magically, randomly, and perfectly get things right. That we are having to think about multiple choices. We are having to make sure that we are pulling knowledge from other areas in order to apply it to whatever problem we are currently working on. There are some other reasons why it's a really good idea to encourage it. I'm sure you've had examples where children have been reluctant to start or unaware of where to start. Well, by modelling, what you can do is give them a bit of a platform. You could say, right, okay, you can borrow my idea initially. You are going to go off now and do the rest. So it can be a really good thing to break down that reluctance to start. It can also mean that some children are just really quite keen because they may have struggled to formulate ideas. You give them an idea and actually they can buy into that. They can be quite excited by it. So we don't always want to say you can't use my idea. There may be appropriate times where you don't want them to do that for assessment, for example, but there might be other times where actually you can give them an idea and they'll be really buying into it and they want to crack on with it, which is great. Right, so we're going to have a little look at this Alex Quigley book, just very briefly. There is copies at Broome Park, so I'd recommend you to have a look at it if you haven't yet already. It's a really interesting book about how we close the gap in children's acquisition of knowledge and vocabulary. There's lots of really quite startling statistics in there, but one of them is that children, we need to kind of expose them roughly between 10 and 15 times to a new word before they are able to use that as part of their vocab. And therefore, in the modelling part of I do, we do, you do, if you're able to model the language, which we know they may not already be using, particularly our technical or tier 2, 3 words, then that's just going to help increase that exposure, which will increase the amount our children hear it, and hopefully the amount that they're going to then start using it in their explanation and their work and their tasks. At this point, before we go into actual physically modelling for you, just want to briefly talk about how to model to the children. It does not have to be via a visualizer. There are lots of different ways to model towards the children, and you will know best for your subject and your classes what works. But it could be that you use the visualizer. It might be that you just use the whiteboard. It could be you use flip chart and you use that later to return to. You can keep it up in your classroom. It might be for a practical subject that you actually just physically show them. So music, we might drum out rhythms on the djembe for them to see what is expected, how to sort of sit with the drum, for example. So it can be however you want to model. Please don't fall into the trap of thinking it has to be on a bit of paper for it to be purposeful. The only other thing to mention is just to think a little bit of carefully around what task you model. I've fallen into the trap before. English is a good example of this, where I wanted children to write character descriptions. Let's say it's about Greek mythology, and I want them to write one about Theseus. If I model writing a character description for Theseus, then I'm almost guaranteeing that the class will borrow and take ideas from what I've modelled. Now, that sometimes is fine, but if I'm trying to get to what the children know and what they can apply, me doing that is limiting them because I know they're going to borrow what I've put up on the screen. So it might be that I model for a different character. I might model for Perseus and then make that really clear to the children, say, I'm modelling a different hero, but can you see how I'm doing it? Then through the we do part, they contribute to that. And then on the you do part, they move over to the hero, for in this example, Theseus, that you want them to describe. Yes, there'll be things they can borrow and draw across, but then that's them having to work that out rather than them just copying exactly what's on the screen. Right, I'm going to move to visualize now and we'll work through quite a simple maths problem to kind of look at how we would physically do I do, we do, you do. Okay, so we're going to do a short illustration. I'm going to use quite a basic maths addition just because hopefully it will take away any of the subject knowledge issues. You'll all be able to do it, and we can then focus on the process of I do, we do, you do. I am also, just to be clear, just using some squared paper because I don't have a book. I'm using a whiteboard pen just because I want it to stand out more on this example on the board. What I would say to you, though, is if you're modelling with your children in class, particularly if you're doing it in a book or a paper, do it exactly how you wish them to do it in their book. So don't use a whiteboard pen. Use your normal pen or pencil combination so they know exactly what is required. But I've started with the date underlined. LO, we've got space to go up here. And then for the I do section, I would start modelling it. So I'm going to give them and say, right, class, we're going to look at doing hundreds plus hundreds in addition. So I'm going to write out the number sentence first of all. Right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm using column addition for this. So I'm going to write my first number out and I'm going to keep one number, one box. Now my next thing is I know I'm adding. So I'm going to put the addition sign to the side here. And for column addition, I know that I'm going to have my columns of ones, tens, and hundreds. So this 123 needs to fit underneath. So I know that the 3 stands for ones, so that needs to go in the ones column. The 2 stands for tens, and the 1 stands for 100. I'm then going to draw a line, and they would use a ruler for this, underline there, to know that this is the calculation I'm doing, and my answer is going to go underneath. Right, so I'm going to always start with the ones. I'm going to add my 4 and my 3. I'm now going to move on to my 3 tens and my 2 tens, which gives me 5 tens, and I'm going to move on to my 200s plus 100, which gives me 300. At this point, I'm just going to quickly check. So I've added a 200 number to a 100 number, and my answer is a 300 number. That seems good. So I'm using sort of just my basic rounding there. Pretty happy with that. I'm going to put that answer back up. So this is kind of the I do part. Now you don't need to notate that on there, but for this purpose, I'm just going to put it on there to make it clear in a moment. So the idea is very much you showing the children the process, the method, the expectation, whatever it might be, what it is that you would like them to do and how to do it. It may be worth not just doing one example, but you doing 2 examples, 3 examples, depending on your class, to make that really clear. For the purpose of this video, I'm just going to do one. I'm going to move on to the we do section. In the we do section, for this example, I would give them the next question. I might make it the same level of difficulty. I might make it slightly harder if they all seem pretty on it. But I would give them the question. I would then at this point really advocate the use of mini whiteboards to say to the children, right, you now have 2 minutes to see if you can work out. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to start with the 413 here. I would like you to go away and work out what the rest of it will be. And then some of you are going to explain it to me in a minute. And I'd give them time. And in that time, I'd rotate around the classroom. I'd look at who is doing what. Is there anybody who's stuck? And I would start getting an understanding of where my class are in terms of their learning. As the time finishes, I draw them back together and say, right, I've given you the first part. Is there anybody who can tell me what I need to do next? Now, this is a brilliant time to start addressing some of the misconceptions because there will be children who will say to you, you just need to put 172 underneath. And you can play the fool a little bit. You can write 172 badly like that. And hopefully they will spot up and say, no, sir, that's not what you should be doing. But there will be children whose presentation will let them down in this circumstance. There may be children who don't understand about place value columns. So you need to be really explicit. When they say you put 172, you check for understanding. You say, right, where do I put it underneath? Tell me exactly. How do I know when I've got it right? And you make the learning really explicit. So hopefully you get to the point where they say you put the 2s under the 3 because they're in the 1s column. The 7 would go in the 10s column and the 1 would go in. Now, obviously, they wouldn't scribble it out like this, but just for the illustration, that's how I'm going to do it on this video. If I was doing this on a big whiteboard, I'd have the misconception. I'd have rubbed it out by that point and I'd have written the right answer next to it. We would then work through and I'd get children to verbalize their thinking here. Again, going through that metacognition. Right, 3 plus 2. Right, what is this? 3 plus 2. No problem. I can do that. That's 5. 7 plus 1, is it 7 plus 1 or is it 7 tens plus 1 10? And just get them being really explicit about that all the time, building back and supporting. So let's presume we finished this bit and this was the we do part. This would also be an excellent time for you to be able to make a judgment about who in your class needs a bit more support and who in your class can just get on. So it might be that you've got 5 children who are really struggling at this point still. You notice that they're still putting the wrong numbers in the wrong place. I would recommend you draw them together and you work with them independently while the rest of the class get on with the next task. And the next part of it would be the you do, where the children go off and they apply this knowledge. The benefit and the beauty of having this, though, particularly if you can still have it displayed in the room, is that they can then go back and check. So they can see almost the model of how we solved it. Have I laid it out correctly as a presentation, right? But it also just shows them that they were successful. Okay, maybe not independently, but as a class, we were successful in solving problems. And it just boosts that confidence just a little bit. It reduces that nervousness and anxiety about them starting the task and gives them a little bit of a sort of head start on the task. If there are any questions about this, now I know this is a very mathematical sort of example. So just in a practical subject in music, let's say I'm doing chords with my year 7s. I might play the chords on the keyboard. I might show them using something like Google Chrome. I'd show them the chords so they can see it on a screen. I might use a visualize to show them my fingers on the piano. In the we do part, I might say to them, right, we've done C major. We're now going to work out F major. Here's my starting note. You have 30 seconds to work out what the others are. Can you do that? I'd go around, have a quick look. I'd then get the children to explain to me which fingers I might be using, which notes I might be playing. Excellent. And then in the you do section, I might say, right, your task is now to go and find G major, D major as an extension, and then let them get on while I work with children who are still stuck at this point. So I do, you do, we do, and then you do. Right, my final point will be just to remind you that this is a tool. Like everything we do in the classroom, it is valuable if used in the right way at the right time. Please don't feel you have to use this every lesson with every class. But there will be times where it might be a really powerful strategy to get those children engaged, display your high expectations, and to show them exactly what is expected in this lesson. So I'd encourage you to have a go. Do let us know how you get on, and we'd love to see any examples that you feel have gone particularly well. Thank you very much.